Picture this. It's 1917, middle of the First World War, and Britain is starving. Not figuratively, actually starving. German U-boats are sinking supply ships faster than they can be replaced, and the men who would normally be farming, they're in trenches in France. The British government is desperate. They need food, need it fast, and they need machines to replace the farmers who left for war. So they placed an order. 5,000 tractors, from America, from Henry Ford. Now here's the thing about Henry Ford in 1917. He's already famous. The Model T has made him the most successful industrialist in America. 15 million of them sold, half the cars on every road. But what most people don't know, what Ford tried to keep quiet, is that he's been obsessing over tractors for a decade. Not publicly, secretly, building prototypes in a corner of his factory, testing them on his farm, experimenting endlessly because Ford has a problem, his board of directors. At Ford Motor Company, they think tractors are a terrible idea, a distraction, a waste of resources. Every time Ford brings up building tractors, they shut him down, vote against it, tell him to focus on cars. So Ford does something remarkable, something that would define his entire approach to the tractor business. He goes around them. In July 1917, right in the middle of the war, he incorporates a completely separate company. Henry Ford and Son Incorporated. His son Edsel is his partner. They use Ford family money, Ford family control. The board of Ford Motor Company has zero say, zero input, zero control. And Ford starts building tractors under a different name, not Ford Tractors. Because some opportunists in Minneapolis had already trademarked that name, hired a guy named Ford, paid him to use his name. So Henry Ford calls his tractor something else. Fordson. Henry Ford and Son Fordson. The first production. Fordson tractors. They don't go to American farmers. They go straight to Britain. Loaded onto ships, sent across the Atlantic, delivered to British farms where they're desperately needed. Ford is selling them at $750 each. Not making much profit, but he doesn't care. This is about proving a point. About showing that tractors can be mass-produced just like cars. About demonstrating that small farmers, not just giant wheat operations, can afford mechanized power. Because in 1917, tractors are rare, expensive. Most of them are massive steam-powered monsters that cost thousands of dollars, weigh tens of thousands of pounds, require specialized operators. They're suited for vast prairie grain farms but useless for the average farmer with 100 acres. Most farmers still use horses. 4, 5, 6 horses per farm. Horses for ploughing, horses for planting, horses for harvesting, and horses eat. A lot. One horse consumes several acres worth of crops every year just in feed. You're farming to feed. Your horses so your horses can farm. It's inefficient, exhausting. And Ford has witnessed this his entire life. Ford grew up on a farm in Michigan, hated farm work, despised the endless manual labor, the brutal physical toll. He once said his goal was to lift the burden of farming from flesh and blood and lay it on steel and motors. This isn't marketing talk. This is personal. Ford left the farm as soon as he could, went to Detroit, became a machinist, eventually built automobiles. But he never forgot what farming was like, never stopped thinking about how to mechanize it. As early as 1907, he built his first experimental tractor, called it the automobile plow. It used parts from the Model B car, a binder's rear wheels, a 24-horsepower engine. Crude, experimental, but it worked. Over the next decade, Ford kept experimenting. Different engines, different configurations, different approaches, but he couldn't get approval from his board to actually produce them. So most of this work stayed private. Test tractors on his farm, prototypes built in corners of his factory, nothing public, nothing marketed, until the war created the opportunity he needed. The Fordson Model F that goes into production in 1917 is revolutionary in ways that aren't immediately obvious. It's not the first tractor, it's not the most powerful, it's not even the best designed, but it combines something nobody else has managed. It's small, lightweight, mass-produced, affordable, and distributed through Ford's existing dealer network. The same dealers selling Model T cars can now sell tractors. Same parts suppliers, same service infrastructure. This matters enormously. The Fordson weighs 2,500 pounds. Tiny compared to most tractors of the era. It produces 20 horsepower from a 4-cylinder engine almost identical to the Model T engine. Same basic design, just scaled up slightly. It uses a 3-speed transmission, worm gear differential, no Conventional frame. This is critical. Most tractors are built on heavy steel frames. The engine bolts to the frame, the transmission bolts to the frame, the axles bolt to the frame. Frame provides structure, but frames are heavy, expensive to manufacture, require precision welding. Ford eliminates the frame entirely. The Fordson's engine block, transmission housing, and differential housing bolt directly together. They create the structure. The stressed skin design, same principle aircraft would later use. It saves weight, saves materials, saves manufacturing time, makes the tractor simpler to build, faster to assemble. This is pure Ford thinking. How do we make this cheaper, faster, more efficient? But here's what Ford doesn't advertise, what he tries to downplay, what he hopes farmers won't notice until they have already bought the machine. The Fordson has problems, serious problems, deadly problems. The most dangerous is how easily it flips over backward. This kills people, not occasionally, regularly, consistently. In farming communities across America, stories spread quickly. A farmer in Iowa hits a stump while ploughing. His Fordson flips. He's crushed beneath 2,500 pounds of iron and steel. A farmer in Illinois catches his plough on a buried rock. The tractor rears up like a startled horse. He jumps, but not fast enough. A farmer in Wisconsin is working a hillside. The implement binds. The tractor rotates backward in less than a second. His family finds him an hour later. See, the Fordson is short. Its wheelbase is compact to make it maneuverable, to let it turn in tight spaces, to make it practical for small farms with irregular fields. But that short wheelbase creates instability. Its center of gravity is high because the engine sits up above the transmission, because everything is compact and vertical. And when you're pulling a plow or a heavy implement and you hit an obstruction, a rock, a root, a stump, anything that stops the implement's forward motion, physics takes over. The implement stops. The rear wheels keep turning. All that torque, all that rotational force has nowhere to go except to rotate the tractor around its rear axle. The front end lifts, keeps lifting 1 second, maybe less, sometimes half a second. And suddenly the tractor is vertical. Past the point of no return, falling backward, crushing everything beneath it, landing on the operator. There's a nickname for the Fordson that spreads through farming communities, the Widowmaker. Farmers know this. Everyone knows this. In 1918, the Eastern Implement dealer claims 36 drivers were killed by Fordsons. By August 1922, over 130 men dead. Ford's representatives try to blame operator error. Claim farmers are using the tractors wrong, attaching implements incorrectly, not understanding proper technique. And there's some truth to this. Many farmers are buying their first tractor ever. They don't understand how different tractors are from horses. With horses, if you hit an obstruction, the horses stop. Simple. With a tractor, hitting an obstruction can kill you, but it's not just operator error. The Fordson's design makes it particularly prone to this. The worm drive location, the lightweight construction, the short wheelbase all contribute. Ford eventually makes changes, enlarges the radiator, adds weight to the front to hold the nose down, relocates the worm drive from above to below the differential, which helps slightly but creates other problems, adds longer fenders with built-in toolboxes, not for style, but to prevent the tractor from going all the way over. If it starts to flip, the fenders hit the ground first, might stop the rotation before it kills the operator. Might. Ford never admits the design is fundamentally flawed, never issues a recall, never offers to retrofit existing tractors with safety equipment. Because doing so would acknowledge the problem, would open Ford up to lawsuits, would hurt sales, so he stays silent, makes quiet improvements on newer models, and moves forward. Despite the safety issues, the Fordson sells, and it sells enormously. In 1918, production ramps up. Fordsons are being built not just for Britain but for American farmers. By 1919, production exceeds 60,000 units. By 1920, the Fordson has captured massive market share, and this terrifies Ford's competitors. International Harvester, the biggest farm equipment manufacturer in America, the company that had dominated agricultural machinery since the merger that created it in 1902, watches this happen with growing alarm. They've dominated the tractor market for years. They've invested millions in research and development, built sophisticated manufacturing facilities in Chicago and Rock Island, developed dealer networks across every farming state in the country. They've earned farmers' trust through decades of reliable equipment. Their McCormick and Deering brands are household names in rural America, and suddenly Ford comes in with a cheap tractor. uses his automobile fame and his dealer network, and starts stealing their customers. Stealing market share they've spent decades building. In 1920, International Harvester controls about 39% of the tractor market. By 1922, it's down to 18%. Ford's taking their business, taking their customers, taking their future. But then something happens that changes everything. The agricultural depression of 1920 and 1921. Farm prices collapse, crop values plummet. Farmers who borrowed money to buy land during the war boom suddenly can't pay their debts. Banks foreclose. Rural communities are devastated, and no one was buying tractors. Sales across the entire industry crater. In 1921, Ford sells only 35,000 Fordsons, down from the highs of 1920. Ford's response is predictable if you know Henry Ford. If you understand how he thinks, how he operates, how he views competition, he cuts prices. In February 1922, he drops the Fordson price from $625 to $395. Below cost. He's losing money on every tractor sold. He admits this openly in interviews, doesn't try to hide it, doesn't pretend he's making profit, says it directly. We're selling below cost, we can afford it. Our competitors cannot. This is warfare. Economic warfare. Ford has automobile money. The Model T is still selling millions. He's the richest industrialist in America. He can afford to lose money on tractors temporarily, can subsidize tractor losses with automobile profits, can outlast any competitor who tries to match his prices. His competitors cannot. They don't have automobile divisions printing money. They're pure farm equipment companies. Tractors are their only business. If they sell below cost, they go bankrupt. Simple as that. International Harvester matches the price cut. They have to. Their Titan 1020 and International 816 models drop to $700 and $670 respectively. Still more expensive than the Fordson, but competitive enough to survive. Dozens of smaller tractor manufacturers can't match Ford's prices, can't afford to sell below cost. Can't compete. They go bankrupt, consolidate, disappear. The tractor wars are brutal. By 1923, the industry has consolidated dramatically. What had been over 150 tractor manufacturers in 1915 is now down to a handful. Ford, International Harvester, John Deere, Case Alice Chalmers, a few others. Everyone else is gone, and Ford is winning. In 1923, Ford sells over 100,000 Fordsons. He's captured 75% of the American tractor market. 3 out of every 4 tractors sold in America is a Fordson. This is complete domination. But Ford's victory creates a problem he didn't anticipate. The more successful the Fordson becomes, the more it exposes its limitations. The Fordson is excellent for ploughing, adequate for belt-driven work, but it's terrible for cultivation. Its low ground clearance means it can't navigate growing crops without damaging them. Its fixed front axle makes row crop work difficult, and it lacks a power takeoff, the rotating shaft that would let implements be driven directly by the tractor engine instead of using separate motors. International Harvester sees this weakness and exploits it. In 1924, they begin testing a new type of tractor in Texas, something they call an all-purpose tractor. It has high ground clearance, narrow front wheels, and it's designed for cultivation as well as ploughing. By 1925, they release it nationally. The Farmall. This tractor can do everything. Plough in spring, cultivate in summer, harvest. In fall, one machine replaces all the horses on the farm. Not just some of them, all of them. This is what farmers actually need. The Farmall is more expensive than the Fordson. It's more complex, but it's more useful. Farmers start buying Farmalls instead of Fordsons. John Deere releases their GP General Purpose tractor. Case releases their Model CC. Everyone is building cultivator tractors now. Tractors that can do what the Fordson cannot. Ford tries to respond. He develops attachments for the Fordson. Ways to raise the front end, narrow the rear wheels, make it work in row crops. But these are compromises. The Fordson is fundamentally designed for ploughing, and trying to make it into a cultivator doesn't work well. Sales begin to slip. In 1926, Ford's market share drops. In 1927, it drops further. International Harvester's Farmall is outselling the Fordson in many regions. And then Ford makes a decision that shocks everyone. In 1928, he announces that Fordson production in the United States will end. He's shutting down American tractor manufacturing. moving everything to Cork Island, where Ford has been building tractors for export since 1919. The official reason is that he needs the production capacity for his new automobile, the Model A. The Model T is being discontinued after 19 years, and Ford is launching a completely new car. He needs every inch of factory space, every skilled worker, every resource focused on this transition. The tractor business is secondary, expendable. But there's another reason Ford doesn't say publicly. He's losing the tractor wars. The Farmall and other general-purpose tractors are superior products. Ford would need to redesign the Fordson completely to compete. That takes time, money, engineering resources, and Ford is focused on cars. Tractors were always a side project, a passion project. When they stop being profitable, stop being easy, Ford walks away. This is vintage Henry Ford behavior. He pursues projects with intense focus until they no longer interest him, then abandons them without hesitation. The Fordson had served its purpose. It proved tractors could be mass-produced. It made farming mechanization affordable. It destroyed competitors. But now the market has moved on and Ford doesn't want to chase it. Production continues in Ireland and later in Dagenham, England. European farmers still buy Fordsons. The Soviet Union becomes a massive customer, importing over 250,000 Fordsons between 1920 and 1927. They're so popular they appear on Soviet propaganda posters, symbols of mechanized agriculture and industrial progress. But in America, the Fordson era is over. Here's what most people don't realize about the Fordson's impact. What historians miss when they focus only on the machine itself, on the technical specifications, on the production numbers. It fundamentally changed American agriculture in ways that are still visible today, still measurable, still affecting how we live and what we eat. In 1920, there were over 25 million horses and mules on American farms, 25 million animals, each one consuming acres of crops just for feed, requiring daily care, needing rest, getting sick, dying young. By 1940, that number had dropped to under 14 million. By 1960, under 3 million. The replacement of horses with tractors, which the Fordson accelerated more than any other single machine, more than any other technological change, freed up millions of acres previously used for growing horse feed. Millions of acres that had been dedicated to keeping farm animals alive. That land could now grow food for people, grow cash crops like cotton and tobacco, grow exports that earned foreign currency. This increased agricultural productivity enormously, dramatically, in ways economists are still calculating decades later. Fewer farmers could work more land, produce more food, harvest more efficiently, plant more precisely. This had enormous economic effects that rippled through the entire American economy. Rural populations declined as mechanization reduced labor needs. Fewer workers needed per acre meant fewer families could make a living farming. People moved to cities. Urban populations swelled. Small towns shrank, then disappeared entirely. Main streets that had thrived for generations went quiet. Schools closed. Churches combined congregations. The entire structure of rural America changed, transformed by machines like the Fordson. And farm sizes increased. Small farmers who couldn't afford tractors, who tried to compete with horses against neighbors with Fordsons, struggled to stay profitable. Couldn't plow as many acres, couldn't plant as quickly, couldn't harvest as efficiently. They sold out to larger operations that could afford tractors, could leverage mechanization, could achieve economies of scale. Agriculture consolidated. Farms grew larger, fewer, more industrial. This process had started before the Fordson, but the Fordson accelerated it dramatically, irreversibly, permanently. The Fordson also changed what farmers expected from machinery. Before the Fordson, tractors were specialty equipment, expensive, complicated, requiring expert operation. After the Fordson, tractors were consumer products, mass-produced, affordable, sold through dealers supported by parts networks. This created an entirely new industry model. Ford didn't invent the tractor. He commoditized it, made it ordinary, made it accepted, and the price war Ford started that changed industry economics permanently. Tractor manufacturers could never again charge premium prices for standard models. Competition became brutal, margins became thin. Only companies with scale could survive. This forced consolidation, forced efficiency, forced constant innovation. The modern farm equipment industry, with its handful of giant global manufacturers, traces directly back to the competitive dynamics the Fordson created. But what about Ford himself? What about his relationship with tractors after 1928? He doesn't abandon tractors entirely. In the 1930s, while Fordsons are still being built in England, Ford starts thinking about tractors again. American farmers are still using machinery, and Ford sees opportunity. In 1938, he meets an Irish engineer named Harry Ferguson. Ferguson has developed a revolutionary three-point hydraulic hitch system that allows implements to be attached to tractors in ways that prevent the kind of flip-over accidents that killed so many Fordson operators. The implement mounts directly to the tractor, below and behind the rear axle. When it hits an obstruction, the hydraulic system releases pressure automatically. The tractor can't flip backward. This is the safety feature the Fordson always needed. Ford and Ferguson make a deal. A handshake agreement. No written contract. They'll build a new tractor together. Ford provides manufacturing capability and distribution. Ferguson provides his hitch design and implement system. In 1939, the Ford Ferguson 9N goes into production. It's everything the Fordson wasn't. Safe, versatile, well-engineered, it sells for $585. Expensive compared to the late 1920s Fordson, but cheaper than most competitors. And it's excellent. The 9N becomes another massive success. Nearly 800,000 sold over 13 years. But that's a different story, a different tractor, a different era. The Fordson had already accomplished what Ford intended. It brought mechanization to small farmers. It proved tractors could be mass-produced profitably. It destroyed competitors who couldn't match Ford's efficiency. And it changed agriculture forever. Walk through any farm museum today, you'll find Fordsons, grey-bodied, red-wheeled, compact little machines that look almost toy-like compared to modern tractors. But these machines ploughed millions of acres, fed nations during wartime, replaced countless horses, killed dozens of operators, made Ford millions, lost Ford millions, and ultimately shaped how we think about agricultural machinery. The Fordson wasn't the best tractor ever built. It wasn't the safest, wasn't the most sophisticated, wasn't the most reliable, but it was the most important, because it made tractors normal, made them accessible, made them expected. Everything that came after, the Farmall, the John Deere GP, the Ford Ferguson, all of it built on the foundation the Fordson established. Mass production, low cost, wide distribution. These became industry standards because the Fordson proved they could work. Henry Ford tried to hide his greatest invention, not because he was ashamed, but because his own company wouldn't support it, so he built it anyway, separately, secretly. And in doing so, he created something that outlasted the Fordson itself. He created a template, a model, a way of thinking about how to mechanize agriculture that persists today. 750,000 Fordsons sold globally between 1917 and 1928. 750,000 machines that replaced horses, increased productivity, changed farms, altered rural populations, freed up land, fed nations. That's the Fordson's legacy. Not perfection. Impact. And maybe that's the most Henry Ford thing about the whole story. He didn't build the perfect tractor. He built the tractor that mattered. The one that changed everything, despite its flaws, despite its dangers, despite opposition from his own board. He saw what needed to exist and made it exist. The fact that it killed people, that's tragedy. But the fact that it transformed agriculture, fed millions, proved that small farmers could afford power, that's history. 75% market share at its peak. 75%. 3 out of every 4 tractors sold in America. That's not just success, that's domination. And Ford achieved it with a tractor he had to build in secret, had to manufacture through a separate company, had to defend against his own board of directors. The Fordson Model F. 20 horsepower, 2,500 pounds, $395 at its cheapest. No frame, worm gear drive, prone to flipping backward, killed over 100 men in just a few years, sold 750,000 units, changed agriculture forever. That's the machine Henry Ford tried to hide. That's the invention that mattered more than anyone expected. That's what happens when you refuse to accept that something can't be done just because your board says no. The tractor wars are over. The Fordson won. Even though it lost market share, even though Ford abandoned US production, even though better tractors replaced it, the Fordson won because it proved it could be done. Mass production, low-cost, mass market. And once that was proven, there was no going back. Agriculture would never be the same, small farms would never be the same, rural America would never be the same. All because one stubborn industrialist decided that farmers deserved better than horses, and he was going to give it to them whether his board approved or not, whether it was safe or not, whether it was profitable or not. He was going to build a tractor that small farmers could afford, and he was going to prove that it could be done. He did, 750,000 times, in 11 years, across 3 continents. That's the Fordson Model F. That's Henry Ford's greatest invention, the one he tried to hide, the one that changed everything anyway.